Welcome back to the Deeper Dive podcast, produced locally in the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., here at Sacred Heart Roman Catholic Church in La Plata, Maryland. My name is Bill Winnell, joined today by Father Larry Swink. Good afternoon, Father.
Hey, how doing great. Happy New Year almost.
You too. And Msgr Charles Pope. How are you, Msgr?
I'm in good shape for the shape I'm in.
Very good. On this New Year's Eve, Father and Msgr are going to discuss the family, the structure, and some other attributes. Father Larry.
Sure. Yeah, so Msgr Pope, I really enjoyed reading your blog on the family, where you talked about the Holy Family taking the readings of this past Sunday that we just had, and you talked about the structure, the struggles, and the strategy for having a Holy Family. So, I don't think we hear a lot about the biblical structure of the family, and let's just start off with that. What does it look like to have a biblical structured family?
The Feast of the Holy Family has a lot of options in the readings, and they sort of rotate a little bit through. But, the Feast of the Holy Family occurs, unfortunately, in that little Sunday between Christmas and New Year's. And it's a problem first of all, because it kind of gives you a lot of time whiplash. We go forward in time, and then we have to come back in time for the Feast of the Epiphany. And in the old calendar, the Feast of the Holy Family is on the Sunday after Epiphany. So, anyway, enough said. But all that said, it is what it is. And unfortunately, even though a lot of our families are elsewhere at Christmas or sometimes together, but in the church, we have a lot of people away for this important feast. And that said, the readings are very rich. They're good. I'll just give you a quick reminder of a couple of the things that were said from Sirach again. God sets a father in honor over his children, a mother's authority he confirmed over her sons. That was from the first reading. And then again, in the Psalm, may your wife be like a fruitful vine in the recesses of your home. Oh, not too fruitful though, Father, please. Oh, not too many kids. So it kind of envisions a large family. Wives should be subordinate to their husbands, and husbands should love their wives, and children should obey their parents. And that's from Colossians. And then, depending on which year it is in the different Gospels, we have each year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem, so they were religiously observant, and again, Jesus was obedient to them and advanced in age and grace and wisdom before them. Okay, so all that would lead to maybe some of the following things. Marriage is one man or one woman till death do you part, bearing fruit in your children. That's what marriage, and by extension, family is. So you have this. We are living in a time where marriage has not really been redefined; it's been undefined. And we do have a definition. We say, well, what's your definition of marriage? I said, one man for one woman till death do you part, bearing fruit in your children. Well, what do you say that? Because God does. That's how God set it up. Genesis chapter 2. But then we look into the family itself, and it speaks then again of a father who has honor, who's is honored in his family, a wife and a mother supportive of her husband, authority. A husband supports, loves, and encourages his wife. And he confirms her authority over the children, you see. Children then who honor and obey their parents. Fathers and by extension, mothers who instruct and admonish their children to grow in age and grace and wisdom. Okay, so, and then finally, basically to sum it all up, there's a father, a mother, and children, all in kind of reverential and supportive relationships in their various roles and duties. And so that's the vision biblically of the family.
Yeah, and in this, you one of the scripture verses that you put down as one of the notes about the biblical nature of marriage is Colossians 3:20-21, where it says, "Wives, be subordinate to your husbands as is proper to the Lord. Husband, love your wives and avoid any bitterness towards them." A lot of times, unfortunately, people, especially women, squawk when they hear that. Oh, I got to be subordinate to my husband. How do you explain that in terms of what Paul's getting at when when wives are to be subordinate to their husbands, as is proper to the Lord?
Yeah, well, I think let's start with the concept of headship for a minute and use maybe the analogy of the body. So I got this big hulking thing called a body, and sitting on top of it is this thing called a head. So that every body needs one head, not two, or you're a freak. No head, and you're dead. So, first of all, we note that headship in any organism, whether the physical body or the organism, maybe of the body politic or a corporation or a parish or a school, or every body, whether physical or understood as a collection of human beings working together, need one head, not two. Otherwise, you have power struggle and all kinds of stuff, which is exactly what we see in so many of our families. So, what God is teaching us is a very clear thing that a body like a family needs one head. Now, that doesn't mean the husband's just a total autocrat and can do whatever he pleases. I mean, to use the analogy of the body a little further, if my head doesn't listen to my heart that's pounding and says, "Slow down, man," then the head's going to be dead. But there might be times, though, where the head has to overrule the heart and say, "Look, we are 20 yards from the finish line. We're pushing through. Just wait a minute."
Mm.
So, in other words, a father or a husband does have authority, but obviously he needs to hear the concerns of the body and seek to meet those needs. And another aspect of authority that's often forgotten today is that in the biblical vision, authority is for service, not for lording it over. So, like I think it was Mark 10, where the Lord said, "You've seen how those who have authority among the Gentiles lord it over them and make their importance felt. But it can't be that way with you who would have authority." He says, "Rather, no, the one who's greatest, the one who has the authority, is the one who serves. For I have come among you, and you call me teacher, master, rabbi, Lord, so I am. But I've also come among you as one who serves. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." So, in other words, authority and headship is given for service to help the body,
Mhm.
not
Right.
harm it or usurp all the rights. And finally, this notion about authority, that authority is always exercised among equals. That one has authority does not mean they have greater dignity or what have you. I mean, go to the top. Pope Leo is Pontifex Maximus, and he's got authority in the church. But at the end of the day, he's no more baptized than you or I.
Right.
And so before God, we all have the same exalted title, snot-nosed kids of God. That's what we all are. We're all children of God.
Right.
And anyway, so I think that there's a lot of cultural things that have led to this hang up we have about authority, and particularly the hang up that feminism introduced with the idea that men should have any authority. They all cry out, misogyny, hatred of women. The real problem in our culture today is not that; it's misandry, hatred of men. There's
Mm.
a huge hatred of men out there among, and just kind of ridiculing of men that takes place. So anyway, you
Yeah.
got me
No.
started. I'm sorry.
No, it's excellent. I appreciate it. And then the other thing you bring up a lot, and I've heard it, but you're very pointed on this matter, is that the children both need and deserve the stable and lasting union of a father and a mother, the
Mhm.
complementary influences of the two sexes. You
Yeah,
know, I think that we've kind of fallen away from that in our culture very much,
yeah.
so that the need for a father and a mother, how Jesus was brought up with a father and a mother. He could have just poofed up and just miraculously been born with Mary and have a single mom, but no, God had
Hmm.
Joseph take over the family to
Hmm.
be his foster father.
Yeah.
You want to say a word about that?
Sure. I think in our culture, the biggest problem is absent fatherhood in terms of the family structure. There are occasionally women missing, but basically the common problem is absent fathers. But look, I mean, if you look at how God sets up marriage, one man for one woman, till death do them part, bearing fruit in their children. Now, why one man, one woman, and so on? Why are they, clinging? It says a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife. Why does he command them to stay stably united and so on? Because that is what is first necessary for children. You got to have a father and a mother, but also it's also what's best for children. And as I point out there, and you've already hinted at it, that the father shows forth the masculine genius of being human, and the mother shows forth the feminine genius. So don't give me this. It's okay to have two fathers or two mothers, or just a father or just a mother. All of that is less than ideal because it doesn't have the full formative thing that God expects. So that we have we see the complementarity of witness that children experience with both parents, and that's helps them to be best, grown up and mature psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally.
Mm.
And without the masculine, as we often have in our culture today, a lot of irregularity set up. I think that part of the reason that homosexuality may be more common today is that the absent fathers, and there's a father wound, there's confusion there. A young boy can't find affirmation from his father, and so he seeks it in unhealthy relationships with other men. Or a woman, a girl, same problem. And so she seeks um, sort of affirmation from, she has a father wound, and she seeks affirmation from men who, well, let's just say a father, one a great gift he can give to his daughter is to love her for her own sake, not
Mm.
with sexualizing her, or and he teaches her how to discern that in a man. And unfortunately, if she doesn't get that from her father, she often seeks attention from other males or men, but who are not necessarily chaste in all their intentions, shall we say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot of issues that set up with an absent father.
Yeah.
And certainly we want to have what God says, one man for one woman. In other words, a father and a mother stably present in the life of their children, who have a stable basis on which to grow, but also the complementarity of witness.
Mm. Yeah, I remember in the seminary, one of our professors had us read a book called Fatherless America by David
Mm,
Blankenhorn.
mm,
And he talked about a lot of the social problems in our in our culture have to do with that very matter of not having a stable dad around. And I think that's where St. Joseph comes in very much so. And I think there was a study done, which I've referenced 1,000 times, about the effect, the spiritual impact that a father can have on his children. I think if like the father just goes to mass, it's like the children, there's a 75% chance of the practice of faith. But if the mother is completely devout and the father is just absent when it comes to spiritual practice, there's like only a 1 out of 50 chance
mhm,
that the children will practice the faith,
mhm.
which is mind blowing. You know, which kind of
Yeah.
shows us that we listen to mom, but we watch dad about what he
Mhm.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's very widely reported, and over again, these same results come up. So it is not just some kind of isolated opinion. It is very, very strongly backed up by sociological studies.
yeah. So you kind of go into the struggles. This is the fun part, and I really enjoyed this part where you said that we should be yet what should be obvious seems to be strangely absent from the minds of many. Sin clouds our judgment and makes some think what is sinful and improper is in fact acceptable or even good. It is not. In our current modern culture, we gravely sin against God, against our children through consistent misconduct and by refusing to accept what is obviously true. So, what are, according to your
Mhm.
estimation, Monsignor, what are some of the major problems that are attacking family life today that need to be remedied?
I think that we have to recall a basic fact that has been turned upside down, that marriage is not about adults, it's about what's best for children. Marriage has its structure because of the what's that's what's good for children. But today we have it all upside down. Marriage is all about the adults. And if they're not happy anymore, we'll just divorce, but the kids will adjust. Say, what? You see? So, in other words, it's all about what's best for adults. We sing songs like, "Oh, what about the children?" We sing songs like that, but we don't really mean it. We don't really live it. And it's amazing to me. I remember I had a couple come to me when I was a young priest, and they said that they were getting divorced, quote, for the sake of the children. I said, "What are you talking about? How could that be good for children?" Well, we don't want them to hear all the bickering. And so, I mean, in a moment of panache, I said, "Stop the bickering."
Right.
Well, what my father, See, it's not what's best for your children. Your children can really look at how you could begin to work through your differences and begin to be more civil. Oh, Father, you're being judgmental. You get all that pushback. So, but the point is that divorce is not better for children. I mean, there could be a rare case where there's a father or a mother who are so abusive or whatever, the only thing you can do is isolate the family from them. But that's rare, and rare cases make for bad law. Okay, the general situation is that parents are going to have differences, and they need to work them out, learn to live together, and show their children how they can work through these things and either live with the difference or resolve it. But too often they just want to bail. And again, there's a good book out. Another speaking of books that was written some years ago now by, of course I forget her name, but it was called Primal Loss. The now adult children of divorce speak out, and they all talk about their experience of living in a divorce situation when they were younger, and again, they're not complaining and grievance and all that sort of stuff, but they're just telling the stories about, well, I kind of had to live out of a suitcase. I mean, one weekend I'd be with my father's family, and then I'd be with my mother's new family, and daddy got a new girlfriend or whatever, and I'm supposed to adjust. And do I call her mom? Do I call her Susan? What do I call her? All the ignominy and the foolishness that we submit kids to because adults can't get along. When parents throw down the cross, the children have to pick it up and carry it. So I think we're dealing with a situation today where we have to get things right again to say that marriage is about what is best for children. And not every marriage is a happy marriage. No marriage is a perfect marriage. But adults need to suck it up a little and say, now, look, we made commitments and we also had children, and we have to do what's right for them now.
Yeah.
And that's not the way people think today. It's all
Yeah.
about the children. And children are resilient. Children will adjust. And that's a terrible premise to make. It's not. So my parents, I can say God bless them. They lived in a generation where, there was this attitude, we stick it out for the sake of the kids. And that was always their philosophy, because my parents had trouble in their marriage, but they stuck it out, quote, for the sake of the kids.
Leila Miller,
Mm.
by the way.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Leila Miller. Right. Yeah. Thank you for that book, Primal Loss.
Yeah, and so, but then you also say there are other issues here at bay is how
Yeah.
people are preparing for marriage. Also,
Mm-hmm.
you go on to say that marriage and family are in crisis due to the willfully sinful habits of many adults in the area of sexuality, marriage, and family life. This includes the sin such as cohabitation, fornication, abortion, adultery, homosexual acts, pornography, the sexualization of children, and the sexual abuse of children. Add this the widespread acceptance of contraception, which has facilitated the illusion, sex without consequences, and promoted the lie that there is no necessary connection between children and sexual relations. And you go on to say that the rebellion of adults against the plan and order of God has caused endless grief and hardship and created a culture that is poisonous to the family, unquote. It's a
Mm-hmm.
powerful line.
Yeah.
But these things, Monsignor, are just so prevalent in our
Mm-hmm.
culture. It's almost like, when you talk to people, I mean, cohabitation, it's like every other couple come
Mm-hmm.
in are living together.
Yeah.
And more than likely using contraception, at while they're in that relationship. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work we need to do in this area,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
And of course, as the church, we're going to probably sleep through it rather than, do what we really should do. But and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But just to say again, yeah, I mean, we have to accept the fact. I like the way Jennifer Rohrbach Morse puts it at the Ruth Institute. She says that, and she's about my age, mid 60s. That most of us of that generation were both perpetrators as well as victims of the sexual revolution. So we've indulged some of its aspects, but we've also suffered from it. And you look today at all the statistics. I mean, and in a way, what we've done is we've taken the prerogatives of marriage and we said, hey, they're available to anybody now. And then marriage is no longer special. And
Mhm.
people used to say, well, I want to get married so I can have, some intimacy, but also children. And these things were together, and we've divided them. And of course, it's always the kids who suffer the most. But at the end of the day, the body count of the sexual revolution is astonishingly high. I mean, again, let's just start with sexually transmitted diseases that cause a lot of problems. Again, the whole sort of sexual addiction that many people have today, all kinds of stuff. Promiscuity causes marriage rates to decline because, well, I hate to put it this way, but it's the old saying: "Why buy the cow if you get the milk free?" So again, there's marriage has suffered enormously because many of the things that would attract people to marriage have been just made available to anybody. And so we also then see that sadly, because of promiscuity, fornication, if you will, um, we also see a terrible destruction of of children, and especially that 85% of abortions are performed on single women, which means a man and a woman fornicated. And the child is paying the death penalty, for their misbehavior, for the parents' misbehavior. I mean, it's just astonishing that nobody wants to look at the high cost of the sexual revolution. High divorce rates, families never being formed in the first place. Marriage rates have plummeted, and that's terrible because the family and marriage are the foundation of any civilization. We could go on and on, with these things, but again, all then the distortions that come into when sex is no longer about having children and having babies. I mean, getting married. Everybody says, "Well, if it's just about pleasure, I can make it whatever I want. Why not?" And then people start to approve of homosexual acts and or all kinds of bizarre things. And so we've seen where our culture has gone. This sexual revolution has brought a great darkness, upon us and wounded our families, our children. And yeah, I mean, I could go on, but you get the point.
You know, you
It's just,
two, you two see it all the time, I'm sure, with marriage prep and other sacramental stuff. But I tell you, it's astonishing as a layperson working with whether it be, prepping couples to start meeting with the priests for their um, for marriage prep, or whether it be for confirmation, baptism, whatever. But when these are not hard and fast, numbers, but I can tell you that the struggle that young people who come to want to get married in the church or have their child baptized, when you start talking about, okay, let's talk about godparents,
mhm.
and they end up, they basically cannot pull anybody. They're like, I have no one that fits that bill. And
Mhm,
it's usually
mhm.
because of exactly what we're just talking about. It's not,
Yeah.
because of anything else. And
Mhm.
I just went through this with my own son, not throwing any of his friends under the bus or anything, but
Yeah.
struggling to name godparents. I don't know
Yeah.
anyone that fits this bill, and it happens every
Right.
year at Easter,
Right.
the same thing. And
Yeah.
that is eye opening. It seems like it's virtually every single person is struggling to find a
Yeah.
practicing
Yeah.
Catholic who checks the boxes.
Right.
You're right. Yeah. I would only add to that. I'd say, Bill, that that gets to the other point I was going to talk about, which is that we have a situation where um, the the church sort of settles down with this rather than speaks clearly about it, but not just speaks clearly, but acts definitively about it. Now, I'll give you a quick example. Back when I was a young priest and I was zealous, and I remember hearing Father Benedict Rochelle saying, we just settle down with this stuff, but he says, why not treat these cohabiting couples like a convalidation? No big church wedding for you, unless you separate and live chastely before the wedding, because you're basically were involved in what amounts to a convalidation. So we'll have something in the chapel with your immediate family, no big, And I said, well, that's what I want to do. So I went in, and my pastor heard about this, that I'd said this to a couple of couples. who were cohabiting, and he says, absolutely not. And then he had the bishop call me and read me the riot act. We
Mm.
don't do that. That is not the policy of this diocese. They're trying to do the right thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But and again, I don't mean to say that that's the only pastoral answer to it, but there's never any consequences for bad behavior in the church. We don't, a couple is flagrantly living in together outside of marriage, and they don't think of it as flagrant anymore, but that is the true effect of scandal, that people are no longer upset by sin, and anyway, so I would say, and that was 30 some years ago, when we were still a little bit closer to the days when people would have considered cohabitation as a living in sin, shacking up. It was considered a terrible thing. But anyway, we have, and then when it comes to divorce, well, we have all these annulments, and so we as a church, we're kind of passing it on, and we don't take a real stand and say, now look, we have to take seriously these issues. So what ends up happening is that we get more of it, and so I think that's part of it too, Bill, and also, but on the other hand, let's just take this idea: those who come to our front door of the rectory stagger in from a completely dysfunctional culture. And what's the best approach to deal with them? They may not have, they weren't raised with the faith very well, and some of them have been away from the church and are trying to return. And do we just give them the cold shoulder or scold them? So I understand the other point of view, but all I can say is that, when you start overlooking or even blessing bad behavior, you get more of it. And that's what I meant earlier when I said, as a church, I'm not so sure we're willing to treat of this more seriously with real consequences for bad behavior.
Right. I think one of the other issues that comes up too, Monsignor and Bill, with this is that the amount of marriages that are plummeting in the church, like the problem is also that most couples choose not to get married in the church anymore.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, it's like, what do you do when the couple comes in and you're like, well, this is one of 5 couples that I
Yeah.
have, as opposed to 30 I used to have,
Yeah.
do
Right.
I put them on the chopping block,
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
or try to work with them in that situation? It's tough because it's
Yeah.
like
It is. Yeah.
it it's abysmal. Even those seeking the sacrament itself has
Mhm.
plummeted, you know.
Well,
So
certainly. Yes.
that point being made, Monsignor, you have a sort of strategy that you propose here, and you say, what are we to do? Preach the word. Whatever the sins of this present generation, and there are many, we must be prepared to unambiguously repropose the wisdom of God's word to our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. Even if we've fallen short personally, we cannot hesitate to announce God's plan for sexuality, marriage, and family. So, you want to say a word about that, Monsignor?
Yeah. I think that our strategic proclamation should include certain elements, and
Right.
I'm talking too much, Father, so you can intervene here, but I'll just quickly list them, and then maybe we can highlight one or two. But first of all, there is not to be sex before marriage. This is what we have to proclaim: no sex before marriage, ever, under any circumstances. Sexual intercourse is rooted in the procreation of children, and there's to be no legitimate engagement of it outside of the bonds of biblical marriage. No exceptions. And we want to make an exception. Well, gay couples are under different. No, we're all under one. Outside of biblical marriage, there is to be no sexual expression. This is not what it's only inside of biblical marriage. Number two, children deserve and have the right to expect 2 parents, a father and a mother, who are committed until death do them part. Anything short of this is a grave injustice to children and a mortal sin before God. And then likewise, homosexual unions or single parent households are not an acceptable alternative to biblical marriage. To allow children to be subjected to such environments for the sake of political correctness does them grave injustice. And too many of our kids are subject to these experiments. And it's not right. It is not right. Catholic Charities has gotten into trouble throughout the country because we don't equate um, a married heterosexual couple who wants to adopt with homosexual couples or with single mother or single father. We always want to prioritize finding a married, stable, heterosexual couple. Oh, you're discriminatory, you're bigoted, Well, call it whatever you want, but we're just using common sense here. It is always best for a child to have a father and a mother in a committed, stable relationship. Anything less than that, or to intentionally subject children to it because of political correctness, has to go. It has to stop. It's wrong. And then marriage is about what is best for children, not for adults. And likewise, married couples need to work to learn how to work out their differences, as was done in the past, and not resort to easy divorces and things which offends God and harms children. And so again, the needs of the children outweigh the needs and preferences or so-called rights of adults. Okay, so that's the basic things we have to get back to saying without ambiguity. And when was the last time the average Catholic would would have heard a sermon from one of our priests throughout this country on fornication and the evils of premarital sex?
Or
Almost never
yeah, or
discussed.
from a teacher at a Catholic high school.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Or even from their parents, frankly. These and so we have that. We have all, of course, we've fallen completely on our face in terms of our duties about speaking against homosexual acts, and likewise, we sort of became a little too indulgent of this whole trans movement when we shouldn't have. I mean, I'm talking collectively. I never did that, but I'm going to tell you right now, too many priests have, and even popes and bishops who are a little bit too gushy with their affirmations, rather without any corrections, you know. So anyway, I think somewhere in the church we've got to get the message right again, and the only answer to this is to first and foremost recover God's plan for marriage and sexuality, and maybe those would be some of the key points, that I would say that we have to get back to proclaiming.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think that we have to, I think what you're saying is just go back to an old school approach to preaching and really, and I also think I think we've lost hope, I guess collectively that people can do it.
Hmm.
Like there's sort of like an attitude that we've bought into, and I'm saying
Hmm.
the present company necessarily, but where it's just too much to ask of the people of God to do this,
Yeah, right.
as if it's too difficult, it's not doable. But I think we've all had experiences where we've challenged people. Um, I've challenged people a lot with the cohabitation issue and other things, and they actually were obedient to my
Hmm.
request, and they actually thanked me later after they were married for that move.
Yeah.
They came to realize that there was a deficiency that needed to be dealt with, with their communication, their love for each other, whatever it might be, that they grew in a deeper friendship and love for each other. And I think you're right that it's something that we have to hold up that is possible with the grace of God, and that's why God became a man, so that it is possible. That's
Yeah,
part of the Christmas narrative,
it
you
certainly
know.
is.
And I think a lot of people are very despairing about family life, too,
Hmm.
because
Yeah, yeah.
it's sort of a dark picture out there, and how often do you see a very well put together, structured, holy family?
Hmm.
It's I mean, they're out there for sure, but I
Yeah.
think the opposite is more true today, and that's why we just sort of throw our hands up and say, "What should we do?"
And 100% agree, Father. And I would also I'd just add that, I think that how many human beings on this planet have ever perfectly lived every advice they ever gave? Zero. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't still give this is the proper thing to do. Now, unfortunately, I think a lot of parents, because we're into the third and even fourth generation of lots and lots of sexual misbehavior and also the regular settling down with divorce and just any other awful thing. And they say, well, I didn't, how can I tell my kids to stay chaste? I didn't. Even more so, don't make the mistakes I did. Is kind of the approach you should take. If you're waiting to be, I can't tell that to my kids because I didn't live it perfectly. You'd never open your mouth. So stop that and just say, look, I had my struggles. I had you before we were married or whatever. Okay, admit that and say that it was wrong and say, I don't want you to repeat that mistake.
Mhm.
See, it's what's
Be-
best for you is to follow God's plan. And too many people today are just, I can't say anything because, it's just too hard. People get upset, or sometimes they think, well, I didn't do perfectly. And And again, all of these are just, I think, um, not appropriate or adequate ways to excuse yourself or me or any of us from living and teaching these truths, even if we've struggled at times to live them well. I'd
Yeah.
also want to just say maybe one more thought about it's an interesting thing of why there's a lot of reasons why there's so much divorce and also a lot of frustration in family life. And part of it is I think is that we have unrealistic expectations of what
Right.
family life is. A lot of couples, they want their marriage to be ideal. And if there's any ordeal, then they're going to look for a new deal. And the problem is there is no ideal marriage. There's just your marriage. Two sinners got married. And they're living in a fallen world governed by a fallen angel and have fallen natures. So the marriage is not going to be perfect. Like any good relationship, it will have tensions as well as blessings, obvious blessings. But even the tensions are blessings in a kind of disguise because through the tensions of marriage and family life, we learn how to forgive, to show mercy, and be patient. And those are virtues that we have to learn or we'll go to hell.
Mm.
And so again, if we want to obtain mercy, we got to learn how to show it. And we learn that in families and families that
Yeah.
aren't perfect and so on. So I think somewhere along the line, we have this idea today that everything should be just perfect. And we've built a culture around comfort rather than just simply what is reality. And the reality is that no family, no marriage, no human being is perfect with a couple of quick exceptions, Jesus and Mary. But all the rest of us were flawed, and we have strengths, and we also have struggles. And you learn in life, especially in the family, that you got to settle down in a good way and accept some of these things, and then deal with them and try to move things forward. But it's going to take time and patience. And anytime there's just conflict, I want out. I want out. Well, you're not addressing the real issue, which is you
Mm.
or whatever the issue in the marriage. You don't run away from problems because they find you. And so at the end of the day, I think we have unrealistic expectations. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Oh, my marriage, if only I'd known this before I get married, all this kind of stuff. Well, you knew before you got married because you were marrying a sinner, not just a sinner, but a sinner. And Um, anyway, somewhere along the line, now there's another thing, and I'm going to get a little controversial, but public policy, of course, has been awful for marriage as well. But I want to just say, I think until the 1930s, there was really no retirement plan. Some people had pensions, but for the most part, you have a situation where, um, people have these Social Security plus 401ks and other retirement plans and they're going to be depending on that to sort of get them through old age. Well, that wasn't possible for the 1930s. So what did you do? Did people get married and stay married in the old days because they were holier than we are or whatever? No, I'll be honest with you. One of the reasons they got married and stayed married was that they needed to do that to survive. You didn't have a stock portfolio or 401k. You didn't have any of that stuff. You had your children. Your children are your stock portfolio. So you raise them, you have a good number of them, raise them up well, mash their food, change their diapers so that when you get old, they'll mash your food and change your diapers.
Mm.
And that's how you survive in life. You build a family and an extended family. And all I just think somewhere we've lost this idea. There's no economic incentive anymore against divorce or for. I mean, it's just people just feel like what's the point in trying to stay? Back in the old days, you had to learn to get through this stuff because if not, you were going to be you lose everything. Your entire security network was around your family, your children, grandchildren, and other people. And you did these things to survive, and we've lost that today. But I got news for you. These 401ks and pension plans and Social Security, they're not going to be there to weep at your funeral. You need a
Yeah.
family around you, and we've lost that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff to contribute. Anyway, we're living in a very poisonous culture, to be sure. That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. My sister sent me a meme today and says, "The one day I told God I'm done, he replied, 'Good, now I can begin.'"
Cool. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm sounding a little preachy, I know, but gosh, it's amazing to me now, and sadly to say, I think if you look historically, what we're going through right now is generally the death knells of a civilization. You study other civilizations when the family started to break apart, and the loyalties and the quote ties that bind begin to unravel. Not that civilization is not going to be around a whole lot longer. Could we turn it around? Sure. Um, we've had religious revivals in this country before, but I'm not so sure anyone has the energy. Everyone else needs to get this thing right, but I'm just going to settle down with the fact that I married the wrong guy or the wrong girl, and I'm just going to get divorced and get out of it. And somewhere in all of this, we have to find, I think, a place where are we going to have the courage to really stand up and teach and insist on these things or not? Right now, I don't see a lot of evidence building that there's a huge turnaround coming. There's some evidence, but even when we talk about with great excitement about maybe the more religious nature of some of the young adults, let's remember only 10% of the young adults of any faith go to church at all. 90% aren't even doing that. The 10% who do come, thank God they're more traditional and committed, and God may be forming a remnant that he'll bring things back, but it doesn't mean that civilization and culture as we now have it will still be here a lot longer. We may have to go through some dark periods. And
Hmm.
this is civilizational stuff we're talking about with the family.
Well, thank you.
And what a cheery note.
Well,
And,
no, it is cheery because I think it gives us hope, Monsignor. I mean,
yeah,
we have to realize
it's
that
so broken, only God can fix it.
right.
I have a
Yeah,
quick
now he can begin his work.
I have a quick
Back it up.
question. Quick question for you, Monsignor. What is your standard first meeting like with a married couple, with a couple seeking marriage?
Well, yeah.
Is it a meet and greet, or is it let's get all the uncomfortable stuff out of the way first?
Normally, we priests are expected to do some kind of a prenuptial
Sure.
investigation, which is more than just quote paperwork.
Yep.
It's meant to investigate the freedom of a couple to marry, as well as the knowledge that they're bringing to the wedding, or to the marriage. Um, and so things will immediately come up in that interview, like, "Are you going to church? What's your address? What's your address? Oh, they're living together." Or so things are pretty much put there. So I will never let that first meeting go by without addressing. I say, "Look, if you're not going to church, you're probably going to end up in hell." I mean, I talk with them, kind of frankly like that. I'm cheerful. They think I'm joking, but I'm really not joking. I mean, you don't stand a chance without the liturgy, the sacraments, and prayer and the scriptures to get you moving in the right direction. I mean, the greatest gift you can give each other is to get your own life in repair, and the greatest gift way of doing that is to follow the Lord's commandments, to get to mass, to receive the sacraments, and grow in the faith. Number two, if they're living together, I say, St. Paul, I usually use Ephesians 5. I say, St. Paul says that fornicators will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. So I want you to really think about this. Now, I don't tell them the story I told you about a bishop who years ago scolded me and told me not to turn their marriage into a convalidation, but I do. I do say this much. I say, here's what I think you should do. I think you should, if you can't move apart to a separate address, because there are a lot of economic problems today. I mean, housing is just out of sight. So, but that said, if you can't, try to, stay chaste, live in different rooms, make a commitment not to have sex together until you're married. And not only that, but tell your family too, hey, we're behaving ourselves. And be a good witness to that, because the idea of you rolling out of bed on that wedding morning and zipping up her wedding dress, and the white wedding dress is a lie. She ain't no virgin, that kind of a thing. Is why not let this be a time where you can witness to your family that you heard the Lord speak to you, and He told you marriage is holy, and you have to become more holy. And so I talk with them like that. I try to be friendly, but also clear.
Yeah.
You know what? Only one time have I ever had a couple walk out on me.
After the first one.
Right. Never. I mean, they never say, "Oh, this is crazy talk." I mean, this guy's just a nut. They never. They sort of, you can sort of tell they sort of expected you to say something, and that, you know what? They know it's wrong.
Yeah.
They know it's wrong. Deep down, they've been making excuses. Well, everybody else is doing it. Nobody mentions it. Well, I mentioned it, and all of a sudden they have to say, he's right. Now, I don't feel like I can invade their privacy entirely by saying to them, you have to report to me every day and tell me you didn't have any, not every day, but I mean, next before the next meeting, whether or not you're having sex. I mean, I don't want to be that intrusive, but I want to be a prophet that said, now look, God told you if you die unrepentant from a sin like this, you go to hell. And if you have a problem with that, talk to him. I just read it to you. Though fornicators will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. And so I get behind the bulletproof glass of God's word and I say, you can talk about how unchristlike I was being, and they don't. But I mean, if they were to, I'd say, but I'm quoting his own apostles. That's what I do. I'm sure Father Larry, you do the same thing.
Sometimes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wait and it turns out poorly if you don't. I've noticed sometimes if you wait too long and you drop it when you have it's almost like it doesn't have the impact. I
Yeah.
think there's something about doing it right away
Yeah.
that's easier. So
That's the benefit of that in the investigation form. These things come right away.
yeah,
Yeah. And
good.
sometimes you find out one of them's been married before. Whoopsie.
Yeah.
Slow down. What was that?
Hmm.
So, I mean, but more commonly, these other things come up. Yeah.
Well, Monsignor, thank you so much for sharing this today. As I said, I enjoyed your insights, and I think they are very, very pointed and very good. So I appreciate you, sharing that with us today after the fact of Holy Family. But
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm sorry to be such a loudmouth sometimes, but I get going.
Great. Could we have your blessing, Monsignor?
May the peace and the blessing of Almighty God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit come upon you all and remain with you always. And may Joseph and Mary intercede for us, and may Jesus plead at the Father's right hand for us and our families. Amen.
Amen.